Hey guys, Mustached Tom here to review Beastars, the final season. So, after watching Beastars, I decided to check out a long-standing analysis, a reading of the context of this story as queer. I will link the video in the description of that video because, boy, did that instantly change some of the things I will be saying here, at least, for the sake of this. So, Beastars is a rather short series, all things considered, following Legoshi, who has a crush on Haru the bunny. And sort of these side stories and subplots and world building all sort of expand at exorbitant rates as you once think that this is some sort of drama mystery, quickly shifts into pure romance, into the side stories, and so on and so forth. All within this context. The core is still between Legoshi and his feelings towards Haru. Well, of course, there are the other characters that have the makeup of such characters such as Louis the deer, who more people outside, out and about reading the comic, and even mayhaps from the adaptation of the show alone, a lot more people have said Legoshi and Louis are endgame, or they are the ship, the primary ship. And I can't even find myself to blame them. The chemistry between these two, within context, within everything that is shown to us, is far more blatant, at least for me, than everything that happens between Legoshi and Haru. So, it is predictably the safe ending, or safer ending, I suppose, so forth, that Legoshi falls in love and gets to be with Haru, despite the disparity between the two at the onset of the show. And I will say that I think all my criticisms from the final section still apply. That being is that I do think that this being the final season, I think this show is a bit too short. Now, that is an odd thing to say, because there is often, especially now these days, this proclivity, when you look around, of like shows outreaching their length, shows that have gone on for far too long. You get your Family Guy, and it falls mostly on comedy shows. I noticed your Family Guy, your Simpsons, South Park, all comedies that have far outgrown or far outstayed their initial, quote-unquote, end point, as it were. But outside of that spectrum, I'm trying to think of shows that have far outlasted their usefulness. And while it is challenging to think of those, it is also equally as challenging to think of shows that have understayed their welcome, like Beastars. And it's also equally as challenging as to think of shows that were just the right amount of length. And the show I immediately jumped to is Avatar: The Last Airbender. That show, for the most part, again, there's like one little thing that, by the end of that show that was unresolved, But for the most part, everything in Avatar: The Last Airbender is finalized. And it feels like, again, for that most part, a complete story. Here, by comparison, Beastars feels like things from even season 1 to 2 were blowing up so fast that it was getting harder and harder to keep up. From the activities that were taking place in the school, where things felt way more constricted, to the more atmospheric world that Beastars was attempting to create with all the stuff about the black market and the Yakuza and all of this stuff that sort of seems to also encompasses the very same show. And by only keeping it to 3 seasons, season 3 by comparison seems absurdly rushed and extremely, I had seen a previous criticism, at least in regards to the manga at the original source, saying how the villain in season 3, Melon, a hybrid creature, took up way too much space and time. However, here in this condensed version, in the adaptation, I feel like he was barely in the show enough. And by extension, there are so many other characters that I feel that is very much guilty of. Like the armadillo character who gets his arm ripped off, and I believe it's like this young panther character who was responsible for that. And their story kind of gets resolved, I think, for the most part. But it feels like it doesn't feel like a true conclusion, if that makes any sense. It feels like we were almost there, and they aren't the only 2 characters that feel guilty of this. In fact, most of the school, by comparison, also feels very much like this by the end of season 3. Like, the quick wrap-up of everything the show resolves is all just, oh, and by the way, we put on the play, like, it's monologued to us in the final episode. Oh, by the way, we put on the play, it's a success, bye. Like, that's the finale of Beastars. It's like, why? Why did you do that? That's what very much it feels like. And I feel like, I don't know if it was pressure from Netflix or pressure from some other higher source, but it definitely comes across as something that was significantly rushed regardless. And it's a damn shame. For a show that is unapologetically 2,000% symbolically gay or queer. Like, after seeing the video that I just saw, the one I will have linked in the description for you guys, really goes over the amount of bits of subtext and so on, and history and so on, to really lay down the foundation. To even suggest that even Legoshi, even being with Haru in itself, is itself still queer-coded, which I found to be an interesting little symbolic interpretation, sure, but it still frustrates me to know that due to the Hays Code only, recently, at least in the indie side of things, being destroyed, thank goodness, but it feels like outward gay representation is still really hard to find. And I mean, like, characters unapologetically being out gay and it not being cut short. That is something that the Owl House, is an immediate another example. Disney, canned the final season of that. It feels almost identical in its issues in that regard. because that world, much like Beastars, was growing rather rapidly outside of the scope of what the show initially was starting as. And Beastars fills a very similar void in that regard. It feels like a world that is far scoped beyond what what 3 seasons can ever get across. And the thing is I understand what they were trying to do with the character of Millen, their third, I think it's their third or fourth villain or pure antagonist in the show. Millen was a representation of the fears and anxieties of, well, having a hybrid child in this world. Hybrids, as we come to see in flashbacks through Millen's perspective, are outcasted, openly so. And I think the problem, at least the one I had, is that the outlash of Millen comes far too quickly, and in conjunction with this mockery. It's self-contained within 2 flashbacks, and I don't think that's enough. Like, one flashback shows a bunch, like, these 4 bullies saying to him to jump off a roof, and then within that same flashback, we see him kill those very 4 same students. And this very similar thing with his mom. And I don't even think... I mean, those both are in the comic, so it's both things are adapted, but I do think that they are too close together. I do think that in a proper adaptation, you could have separated these things a little bit more smoothly to make it sure, you know, that this sympathy that, or empathy, or whichever, is supposed to be, you know, sort of imbued upon a character such as Millen could actually start to digest in the reading of the material. Instead of that, we are instantly regarded in that same, again, sequence that he just kills these people, well, you know, and he's very much still portrayed as this much more psychopathic type character in the current day. And it feels very, very fast and unforgiving in that sense. And that reading is very unfortunate, because I do think that there was a lot of promise with that type of character, as I do believe there have been with every previous antagonist or slash villain in Beastars. And he is the exception. He feels entirely rushed by comparison from all the others. One thing I noted is that none of the villains in Beastars get killed. They get imprisoned. They get in trouble. But they never get killed. This includes Millen, by the way, if you noticed, in the show, too. And I think that's very much intentional, is that these things are still going through a type of system. And while I would argue that Beastars definitely could have used a 4th season, or maybe even a 5th, because again, just how open the world was becoming, this would have allowed for the fleshing out of more of some of these students who get kind of sidelined along the way. Among them, surprisingly, is Juno, just as an example. Juno, what the fuck happened to her character at the end there is beyond me. We have, excuse me, Louis just break up with her in the show, even though that's kind of not what happens in the comic book, or the manga, rather. It seems like he gets he's faking the relationship with the other deer, but it's not going to ever be sexual in the show. And then his physical intimacy, from what I was gauging, at least from the manga, seemed to imply that that's where they were going to go with Juno. But no, at the end of the show, he just breaks it off with her. It's like, what? Wasn't the whole point that those two were going to end up together? But yeah, even that got a little bit ruined as that. But yes, it is very clear that, of course, a show like this was never going to have an openly gay character. At least not one that canonically gets with another male character in a much more, not symbolic way, but a more literal way. That was never going to happen, and I never suspected that it would. And that's one of the main reasons I feel a lot more strongly towards Stranger Things as a show, despite people's big criticisms being dumb and either lying like EFAP did. But the reason that scene, Will's coming out scene, is so strong is because it's literal. There's no hiding it. It's there. It's not subtext anymore. It is text. You cannot erase text. That's something to me that is far, far and removed from where we need to have been years ago, but we still refuse to get there. In 2026 of all days. So yeah, I'm still in search of a gay couple who gets that happy ending. I'm still looking, despite all of my efforts. Still yet to find a single one. Isn't that interesting? You get all these people complaining about how woke things are now. And yet, not even allowed a happy ending. Not even the one. Not one that I can point to, that's for sure. And I've been asking at the end of my videos if there is a one that has a happy ending, let me know. Because, there might be something out there, but it's probably, it might be older first, and it might have other cliches and obvious things going on there, but I digress in saying that I have yet to find that kind of story, which is why I've been trying to make one on my own time. But Beastars, I think, for the most part, is a strong series. It just quick burst through its season finale. I would still say overall, it's still a really great show. The ending is a little bit dissatisfying in that rushed paced sort of fashion. And from what I understand, that is very much reminiscent of even the manga, but the manga had a little bit more time to, a little bit more, I guess, either material in general or filler. Though I'm not sure what, because I haven't read the actual manga myself, so I'm not sure what would constitute filler in this universe, but I digress in saying that Beastars is a fine show, despite having a slightly rushed ending. It's a bit of a disappointment, but I would be lying to myself if I didn't say I enjoyed most of that journey. So I would still recommend Beastars overall, despite its rush, because I do think you can kind of get what they're going for despite the rush. Millen, despite his flaws as a character, still has the seeds of something that is getting across the broader theme of this discrimination that has been right there from season 1 of the show, between the disparity of herbivores and carnivores and the separation as such. So, with that being said, I would actually, again, still highly recommend all of Beastars, despite its quicker ending of the pace of the show. And yeah, they go a bit all over the place. That is true, again, due to its quicker pace. I do think that those, if they had another season, I think they could have explained away some of these things in a more digestible way, like how Melon had gotten from being a Yakuza leader to being a instructor in the school, and maybe this could have also been done through flashbacks. I think, and both perhaps the comic and the adaptation of such, I do think that we could have spent a little bit more time having that separation between the initial bullying of Melon, have it persist a little bit longer before the break, and then have the break. I think that is something that is highly needed for a character of his sort of attitude. I don't think it makes sense for him to break that quickly. It doesn't fit. It doesn't feel realistic, and I do feel like these characters are, despite being anthropomorphic, are made to be read as very humanoid, very much still. And I think when it comes to people breaking in general, I do think way more typically anyways, it is something that is done more over time, more over the years, something that builds and builds and builds, and is something that is like a reoccurring thing, and then there is the final tipping breaking point. And to have it all contained within one flashback, to me, is a disservice. It really, truly is. It reads, as many people have alluded to, and also reviewing this, they compare Melon to a character like the Joker. And the thing is that Joker has various backstories, so, there's that, and Melon sort of has, like, a whole lot of things going on, so I can see even the loose connections in that regard, too. And he is somebody who just gets absolute satisfaction from killing, and I think if it was only in regards to mixed, characters, getting into the mixed relationships, if it was only reserved for that, because there are those who he kills that are outside of that, I'm pretty sure. I think if it was just maintained, if he had a pattern, like the very spots on his body, I feel like that would have made his character feel a little bit more like uniform in terms of getting the message a little bit, to have that message be a little bit more clear as to what he was railing against, because you already have a character like the Joker, and I feel like Melon can very easily break out of being compared to the Joker, because there are a lot of elements to him that, despite being rushed, are very much not Joker. I feel like, Joker is the very pinnacle of having that one very bad day, as the Joker himself puts it. And here, it very much feels like Melon had that very one bad day, bizarrely, and then, just instantaneously snapped. And then snapped again at his mother. It's doubled, but it doesn't fit, I feel like if he had been abused by his mother via flashback, got abused by the kids in another flashback, and then in a third separate flashback, or even a fourth, fifth, somewhere down the line flashback, he finally retaliates, I do think that that would have made Melon that complete character that I think is what a lot of people were kind of expecting for this kind of character archetype. And to see it so rushed does lend itself to being a lot closer to Joker. And that is to say that, I can't even argue that Joker is a very fascinating character in his own right. Don't get me wrong. I think there's a lot of bizarre readings of Melon in that sense, because I've heard a lot of people say he's like Joker, but then also say that they just don't like Melon as a character, despite liking the Joker, even though they just compared the two characters. Like, that is a bizarre reading, then, if you ask me. It's like, why'd you even make the comparison if you hate the character, right? I don't know. It seems like there's a disconnect there. But for me, it definitely comes across as something that could have been a little bit rewritten to match something a little bit more consistent what I think the aim of the character was supposed to be. That's where I lend myself to in terms of creativity. So for those who are writing, if you're, wanting to create an antagonist, or a straight-up villain in this case, there are these two clear roads. You have your very closer to Joker-type character, who's just, chaos reincarnate, essentially. And then you get the character who does slowly and surely get pushed over the edge, is torn to that breaking point. I do think that there's a space for that type of character as well, and I think that character could have been Melon, for a lack of a better way of putting it. But I digress. Beastars is a fascinating show to have watched, and see the pacing, as it has actually helped me in my sense of own writing. It's helped me realize that in order to, make sure that my pacing is where it needs to be, that I need to be more, more cautious of where I'm putting things in relation to one another. How much spacing is required for such, from event A to event B. I think that there is something to glean from this type of show, even in terms as a writer myself. So there's my tips for the writers out there. As for an ending that I do think would have made Beastars even more complete, I actually think this show could have even more heavily benefited from is a time skip. A time skip moving forward a generation, where we see the glimpse of Legoshi and Haru's potential child at perhaps the same age Melon was as a kid, and seeing the mix they would have turned out to be. And then kind of create an environment around that as the ending of Beastars. And maybe certain new challenges may encroach. Who knows, right? I think lending Beastars to just end is the other failure of this show. In terms of its season finale, I think leaving the door open would have been a much, much more appreciated type of ending for this type of show. A window into the brighter future, but actually being able to see through the window instead of just getting this, immediate aftermath of the things that happened of, they just hooked up. That's the predictable ending. It's it's safe. It does feel safe, despite all the chaos and all the carnage and all the wackiness that Beastars has allowed itself to be up until this point, it is so bizarre to me that the endings feel surprisingly a little bit on the safe end. And I think what would have been the daring ending is, again, that flash forward to something a little bit more, to, again, not only lend itself to keep that world open, the Beastars world in itself, but that we can still see that challenges take on new or perhaps recycled, kind of trends in the future of the Beastars world anyway. So I think that would have been the significantly stronger ending that I think would have made Beastars a complete show in this regard. But that is my review for all of Beastars season, in the final season in particular. So if you have not watched it yet, I would highly recommend it. And if you enjoyed this review, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, make sure to check out those links in the description. One, to head you to my petition about small YouTubers. Second, to my PayPal. We can help support me and my channel directly. And third, to my Discord server. We can join Collab Shield, do that cool stuff for free. And until next time, everyone, bye-bye.